Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be doing a first round 2023 fantasy football mock draft. Inside today's video, I'll be breaking down all of the top 12 picks of a 2023 fantasy football draft and talking about why I would select each player at every single spot. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Obviously, this video is being recorded in January. The wildcard games ended, obviously, on Monday. This video is being recorded on Wednesday prior to the divisional round. So there's tons of things that are going to change after the NFL draft in April. And then there's going to be things changing through training camp all the way up until late August or early September when you're doing your 2023 fantasy football draft. So understand that this is more of just a first look. This is nothing definite because obviously things are going to change. So at the 101, despite the fact that running back screwed a lot of people over last season in 2022, especially those first round running backs, a lot of them didn't end up panning out. I still do think a majority of players at the number 1 overall pick, the 101, are going to go with running back. And to me, if you're going running back, there's two players. It's either Christian McCaffrey or Austin Eckler. I think that is really it at running back. Some people might argue for some other players, but I think if a running back is drafted 95% of the time at the 101, knowing what I know right now, it is going to be either Austin Eckler or Christian McCaffrey. Now, there are going to be some people that, they got burned by the running backs last year, and they want to go wide receiver with the first pick, which I think is acceptable as well. I think if you were to go wide receiver, it would either be Justin Jefferson or Cooper Kupp. But at the 101, we are going to go with my guy, my main man, Austin Eckler of the LA Chargers. Austin Eckler has the best of both worlds. He is an amazing pass catcher while also being super efficient on the ground. He was the running back number 1 in half PPR points per game last season, having 204 carries, 12.0 per game, ranking 20th at running back, 915 rushing yards, 53.8 per game, ranking 17th, 128 targets, 7.5 per game, number 1, 107 receptions, 6.3 per game, number 1, 722 receiving yards, 42.5 per game, number 2, and 18 total tugs, number 1 at running back. This guy was sensational. He was amazing. He was fantastic. Justin Herbert, the pervert, loves to check the rock down to Austin Eckler. Now, I know you might want to make the argument that Christian McCaffrey is the better overall running back than Austin Eckler, and that is an okay argument to make. But Austin Eckler, just like Christian McCaffrey, is the focal point of the Chargers offense. They have a solid offensive line, and you know that even if they have another running back behind Austin Eckler, he is the clear workhorse back on this team. He is one of a few running backs that could get 2,000 all-purpose yards in any given season. Now, obviously, he didn't get 2,000 all-purpose yards last year. 915 rushing yards, 722 receiving yards. But is it possible? I really do think so. So Austin Eckler is going to be my 101. Again, assuming you want to go running back. And, we all know that while a lot of analysts and a lot of players that are kind of deep into fantasy, right? If you're watching a fantasy football video in January, you're really deep in fantasy. They might want to go wide receivers early, but we all know that your league isn't filled most of the time with a bunch of sharps. You're always going to have the people who aren't really that deep into football who will be willing to draft a running back at the 101. Again, I'm not saying that the 101 has to be a wide receiver. I would go with Austin Eckler, but I hope you understand my argument there. At number 2, I'm going to go with Christian McCaffrey. Again, people like the safety of the running back position. And Christian McCaffrey, another amazing player now on the San Francisco 49ers. RB number 2 on the season in half PPR points per game. 244 carries, 14.4 per game, ranking 9th at running back. 1,139 rushing yards, 67.0 per game, 7th at running back. 107 targets, 6.3 per game, number 2. 741 receiving yards, number 1. 1, and 13 total tugs, number 3 at running back. So Christian McCaffrey, yet again, having a phenomenal season. I know there were some people that were a little bit nervous about the move to San Francisco. Oh, they have Debo, they have Ayuk, they have George Kittle. The quarterback situation was kind of shit with Jimmy Garoppolo. Trey Lance obviously didn't play too well last season, and now they have big cock Brock Purdy under center. To me, it doesn't matter who the starting quarterback is next year. It could be Brock Purdy, it could be Trey Lance, could be Jimmy Guap, Jimmy G-Spot, and to be honest with you, I don't really care at all. Christian McCaffrey is going to see a high amount of usage game in and game out. Now, a lot of people will point to the fact that, hey, they do have other running backs that they're going to be cycling in on the team, and yes, I do completely agree with that. But at the end of the day, even if they are cycling other running backs into the game, they're cycling them in to get the carries. They're not just cycling in another running back to catch a million passes per game like Christian McCaffrey. Again, this is another one of those guys that can easily get 2,000 combined yards in any given season. The guy is nothing short of amazing. And there were people last year, but Nick McCaffrey's been getting hurt. But the problem with that argument is if the motherfucker doesn't get hurt, he's probably going to finish as the number 1 or the number 2 running back in any given season. At number 3, this is where I think people kind of jump away from the running back position. Obviously, Austin Eckler and Christian McCaffrey, in my opinion, are on a tier of their own. I think this is where the switch gets metaphorically flipped here and people go with wide receiver. Again, Justin Jefferson or Cooper Kupp would be very acceptable here. At the number 3 overall pick, I am personally going to lean with Cooper Kupp. But if you want to make the argument that you would prefer to draft Justin Jefferson over him, I'm not going to have some type of crazy argument with you in the comments. Despite only playing in 9 games, this man had 98 targets, 10.9 per game, number 34 at wide receiver number 1 in half PPR, 75 receptions, 8.3 per game, 23, 812 receiving yards, 90.2 per game, 33rd, and 7 total touchdowns, 14th at wide receiver. Again, playing in only 9 fucking games. And like I talked about off the rip of the video, I know that Matthew Stafford might have fallen off the edge of the earth, or maybe he comes back because that's the report. He's going to play next year. He's going to be the QB1, and maybe he lights things up, right? Maybe he plays fantastic yet again. But I honestly don't think it even matters, because even if Matthew Stafford has a bad season, he is going to force feed the rock to Cooper Kupp, and you are going to be very confident playing Cooper Kupp week in and week out, with the upside that the man could drop 30 plus points in half PPR or PPR in any given game. At number 4, it's pretty obvious. Again, like I said, there is a tier gap from McCaffrey and Eckler into the next group, so people are going to want to go wide receiver yet again, and we're to go with Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson had an unreal year. Wide receiver number 2 in half PPR points per game. Again, Cooper Kupp was the wide receiver number 1, 184 targets, 10.8 per game, number 1 at wide receiver, 128 receptions, 7.5 per game, number 1 at wide receiver, 1,809 receiving yards, 106.4 per game, number 1 at wide receiver, 9 total touchdowns, number 4 at the wide receiver position. So even though people like to make fun of the Vikings, me included, right? The Vikings were a fraudulent team all year long, and Kirk Cousins ultimately checks the ball down with the playoffs on the line on 4th and 8 or 4th and 7, whatever it was, dumps the ball off to TJ Hawkinson for 4 yards. And right, we all like to make fun of Kirk Cousins, Kirk Go Chains, the new nightmares, what they were calling him, right? We like to make fun of Kirk Cousins, but ultimately, based upon the reports, Kirk Cousins is going to be back. And regardless of how you want to judge Kirk Cousins, how you want to make fun of the Minnesota Vikings offense, Justin Jefferson is a force to be reckoned with game in and game out. Another guy that has 30-plus point upside, game-breaking NBA Jam on fire mode, right? The guy can at any point in the game take over and put your fantasy football team on its back. Now, with a player like Justin Jefferson, I don't think I really need to get down on my knees and give this guy the metaphorical gawk 9000, because we all know just how fucking good Justin Jefferson is. At at number 5 is where I think some people might look to go back to running back. If you wanted to stay in the wide receiver lane, that is perfectly acceptable. But at number 5, I think this guy is clearly the head of the next tier at the running back position as of right now, and that is going to be Monsieur Saquon Barkley of the New York Football Giants. Now, Saquon Barkley, going into the year, was another guy that really wasn't drafted at that high of an ADP in 2022. A lot of people were panicking about Barkley because he just didn't look like he had the juice that he's had early on in his career over the last 2 seasons, but he proved all of his doubters wrong. Running back number 5 in half PPR, ran a train on the Minnesota Vikings defense last week. 295 carries, 18.4 per game, number 4 at running back. 1,312 rushing yards, 82 per game, number 4. 76 targets, 4.8 per game, number 6. 57 receptions, 3.6 per game, number 7. 338 receiving yards, 21.1 per game, number 14 at running back, and 10 total touchdowns, number 10 at running back. It appears that the Giants are looking to give the Brinks truck over to Saquon Barkley and give him a fat ass contract. Daniel Jones looking to be back with the team as well. It is very clear that Brian Daboll has turned this organization completely around. Under Brian Daboll, this offense looks immaculate. It looks the exact opposite of last season under Joe Judge. Do you remember that game last year where the motherfuckers on like 3rd and 9 QB sneaked because they didn't want to throw the ball and potentially throw a pick? That type of shit doesn't roll with Brian Daboll. And Saquon Barkley is another running back that has incredible hands. Obviously, it's pretty unlikely that he's going to be up there with a guy like Eckler or McCaffrey having like 780 receiving yards or potentially more, but he does obviously have some hands, which does help him get value in half PPR and full PPR leagues. I think the Giants team is going to look even better next year. I think they look to bring in a wide receiver that would also help out Saquon Barkley a ton. There are only a couple of workhorse running backs in the NFL, and Saquon Barkley is certainly one of them. At number 6, we're going to dabble back into the wide receiver position here with Davante Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, obviously, it's pretty up in the air who the quarterback's going to be for Saquon Barkley, but as we saw, even with Jarrett fucking Stidham under center, Davante Adams was able to have a Thanksgiving-level feast in fantasy football. Wide receiver, 4.5 PPR points per game, 180 targets, 10.6 per game, number 2 at wide receiver, 100 receptions, 5.9 per game, number 7 at wide receiver, 1,516 receiving yards, 89.2 per game, number 3, 14 total touchdowns, numero uno, number 1. Very nice. So, again, I know Derek Carr is more than likely gone. They could put me at quarterback, and I'm still going to confidently draft Davante Adams. There's a lot of rumors that Tampa Bay Tom Brady is coming there. I'm not too sure how reputable that source is, obviously. There's a couple of teams that Tom Brady can end up going to, but as long as the quarterback isn't absolute dick cheese, right? As long as Zach Wilson isn't under center for the Las Vegas Raiders, I am going to smash the draft button on Davante Adams every single time. There were even doubters last year. Can he do it with Derek Carr? It doesn't fucking matter when you're a guy that is as talented as Davante Adams. At number 7, we got Jamar Chase, wide receiver of the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals obviously still in the playoffs. Jamar Chase, wide receiver number 5 in half PPR on the season, 134 targets, 11.2 per game, number 14 at wide receiver, 87 receptions, 7.3 per game, number 12 at wide receiver, 1,046 receiving yards, 87.2 per game, 16th, and 9 total touchdowns, number 4. Now, this is the first wide receiver where you can really make the argument that he has a 1B to his 1A in the offense. Cooper Kupp, very clearly the best receiver on his team. Justin Jefferson, he's got Adam Thielen, he's got Hawkinson, but it's the Justin Jefferson show in Minnesota. Davante Adams, they have Renfro, they have Darren Waller, but ultimately, Davante Adams is that guy. Jamar Chase has titty boy T. Higgins. But that's not a scenario where it scares me away from Jamar Chase. We saw Jamar Chase this season. He's had some ups and he's had some downs. I think we're even going to be able to pull that up. He also missed some games throughout the season. But he had some great games. 28 points. He had 32 points, 33 points, 28 points, 19 points, 16 points, and he had a couple of down games where he was under 12 points in PPR. But again, I'm not going to directly slander Ja'Marr Chase just because he has T. Higgins on his team. Ultimately, he's another player that has weak winning potential. He's one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL. And the fact that he has T. Higgins also helps him because the defense can't just worry about Ja'Marr Chase because they also have another wide receiver that could blow their fucking back out right next to him or on the other side of the field. So Ja'Marr Chase, frankly, is one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. He has one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in Joe Burrow, Joe Shiesty. So I'm very confident in Ja'Marr Chase. He obviously didn't have this game-breaking year like some people were arguing, right, where he's going to be the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football. Obviously, that didn't pan out. Wide receiver number 5 in points per game. Again, we use the points per game metric because players miss games, and the finish at the end of the season, a lot of the times, is very deceiving. Very, very deceiving towards what actually happened. So I like Ja'Marr Chase a ton, even though he didn't technically have that crazy season like people were projecting. If you have ended up enjoying this far, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well as that like button down below. It would help me out a ton. So at number 8, we move to another wide receiver that does have a 1B to his 1A, at least in my opinion. I think some people have been shitting on this guy recently. We got Tyreek Hill, wide receiver of the Miami Dolphins. Now, the reason why I say people are not really shitting on Tyreek, they're shitting on Jalen Waddle because he dropped a couple passes in that Dolphins playoff game against the Buffalo Bills. Now, obviously, as a Dolphins fan, at the time, it was incredibly frustrating to see Waddle drop some passes because ultimately, I think the Dolphins could have beaten the Buffalo Bills. But am I going to sit here and pout like a baby back bitch because Jalen Waddle had one bad game? No. I'm not, because Jalen Waddle's part of the reason why the Dolphins made the fucking playoffs. So even if he has one down game, it's okay with me. Tyreek Hill, though. If Tua played all season, Tyreek Hill probably would have been the wide receiver number 1 potentially last season. Wide receiver 3.5 PPR. 170 targets, 10.0 per game, number 3. 119 receptions, 7.0 per game, number 2. 1,710 receiving yards, 100.6 per game, number 2. 9 total touchdowns, number 4. And if you guys remember going into last season, everyone was panicking. They got their panties in a bunch over Tyreek Hill. And I told everyone to not panic. Draft Tyreek. And people still were nervous. Now, you could easily rank Tyreek Hill over Ja'Marr Chase. And these rankings are not final. If there's players, if you say, oh, Nick, I'd rather have Tyreek over Devontae Adams, I'm not going to have some crazy argument with you. That's just how these things work. They're incredibly close. Again, I think the first 4 players of Eckler, McCaffrey, Kupp, and Jefferson are very clearly in a league of their own. In a league of their own up there. And then you get to Barkley, Adams, Chase, Tyreek. If you flip the order of these guys, you know, it's not going to really affect my thought process, right? I'm not really going to go crazy. These guys are incredibly close to each other. If Tua is able to stay healthy, I really do think that Tyreek Hill has number 1 wide receiver upside. I think he's going to be a steal at potentially the back end of the first round. Now we move to number 9, and this is where I think people are going to take Travis Kelce, right? Because Travis Kelce had such a phenomenal season last year. He's been a phenomenal tight end for basically his whole career, and this year he set himself so far ahead of the other tight ends. He was the tight end number 1 in half PPR, obviously. Finished with around, now this is not exact, it was like 87 or something, but with around 90 more half PPR points than the second highest finisher at the tight end position. 152 targets, 8.9 per game, number 1. 110 receptions, 6.5 per game, number 1. 1,338 receiving yards, 78.7 per game, you guessed it, number 1. 12 total touchdowns, you guessed it yet again, number 1 at tight end. The guy's phenomenal. Unfucking stoppable. Amazing. Every single week. Now, I know towards the end of the season, if we pull up his game log here, people are going to be like, oh, Nick, you remember the end of the season where he had 3.6 points, 4.3 points? Even those down games, look how many games are in the green. That was in standard. So 11, 17, 20, 11, 7, 15. Sure, there's the down games, but there's the 30-point games. There's the 20-plus point games that it's hard to find at the tight end position. I think people really are going to start to see a gap between Kelce and guys like Andrews, guys like Kittle, guys like Schultz, Waller, Pitts. I think it's pretty evident that Kelce is going to be a first-round pick, and I don't think you should be shocked, petrified, if someone drafts Travis Kelce earlier than this. If someone takes Travis Kelce at the 105, I'm going to not look at them and be like, what a dumbass. I'm going to look at them and be like, you know what? I see it. And the only argument you can make against Kelce is that the guy's getting old, right? People are going to say, oh, Nick, he's going to be like 34 next season, right? Or 33. Maybe he'll still be 33. He's getting old. Okay. Sure, use that argument. Try to use that argument. It's stupid. Stupid to project a fall off when you have a guy that is as incredible as Travis Kelce, a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer. One of the best tight ends, in my opinion, ever to grace the gridiron. And he has Patrick Mahomes as his starting quarterback. You don't have to galaxy brain yourself. Have some crazy thoughts to take Travis Kelce in the first round. At number 10, we got CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, this is going to be a hot take for some people. Some people might say, Nick, you fucking idiot. You got to take A.J. Brown or Stephon Diggs ahead of him. And if you wanted to, go right ahead. Go right ahead. But I'm going to be honest with you, the next two picks are going to be running backs, because even though I think this year is going to be wide receiver, a lot more wide receiver heavy early, if only 3 running backs go in the first round of your normal draft. Now, I'm not talking about drafts with a bunch of sharp people. If you're drafting on some websites, right, you might be drafting with some really smart people. But most people draft with their friends, their office mates, people at work. And those kind of people aren't drafting. How many receivers have we already taken? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wide receivers in the first round. Most leagues, that's not going to happen in. So, CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver, 8.5 PPR points per game, 156 targets, 9.2 per game, number 4. Wide receiver, 107 receptions, 6.3 per game, number 4. 1,359 receiving yards, 79.9 per game, number 6. And 9 total touchdowns, number 4 at wide receiver. Now, there's a lot of people that make fun of CeeDee Lamb. Fake alpha wide receiver, this, that, and the other thing. But let's be honest. If the Cowboys go into next season with CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, maybe Odell, CeeDee Lamb's the clear number 1 receiver there. Schultz might be back, he might not be back. Tony Pollard might be gone. Lamb is very clearly the best wide receiver on this team. And I know Dak Prescott recently, outside that Tampa Bay game, things were looking topsy-turvy, right? Against Tampa Bay, he fucking lit him up like a Christmas tree. But there's concerns about Dak. People are nervous about Dak, and rightfully so, right? Dak hasn't played amazing this season, but he's still he's still a top 10 quarterback easily in the NFL. So CeeDee Lamb should be perfectly fine, maybe even better without Tony Pollard next year. I'm a huge fan of CeeDee Lamb's talent. Again, if you want to make the argument that, oh, Nick, I definitely would rather have A.J. Brown or Stephon Diggs or maybe even T. Higgins. Now, I wouldn't take T. Higgins in the first round, but you get what I mean, right? Then I'm not going to sit here and fucking debate with you, Twitter fingers, back and forth, type, right? Because I get the argument you are going to make. But right now, I have CeeDee Lamb as a first rounder. If he ends up being an early second rounder, wouldn't shock me, but I think he is a back half of the first rounder, early second round pick in 12-team leagues. At number 11, this is not really a controversial take, but because we don't know where he's going to play next year, I think some people will take this as controversial. So we're going to go with Josh Jacobs, running back of the Las Vegas Raiders. Will he be a Raider next year? Who knows? They didn't pick up his 5th-year option. He's a, I believe, unrestricted free agent. Let me just check because I actually pulled it up beforehand. So he played, obviously, 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. They did not pick up his 5th-year option, so he's a UFA. So next year, he could be a Raider. He could be on some other team. And obviously, that is going to change my opinion of him, depending on what team he's on. If he goes to a team where I'm like, holy shit, Josh Jacobs is going to get 1 million carries again, then boom, he might even move past Lamb or Kelce. He could even be up there in the top 6 picks. And I was not someone banging the drum for Josh Jacobs last year. Josh McDaniels proved over his career in New England that this motherfucker loved a RBBC, running back by committee. But that's not what happened last year, right? RB 4.5 PPR, 340 carries, 20 per game, number 2 at running back, 1,653 rushing yards, 97.2 per game, number 1 at running back, 65 targets, 3.8 per game, number 11 at running back, 53 receptions, 3.1 per game, number 10, 400 receiving yards, number 8, 23.5 per game, and then 12 total touchdowns, number 6. Depending on which system he is in, he is going to move up or down the rankings. But I'll tell you right now, based upon the eye test that Josh Jacobs clearly looked amazing last year, you don't need a fucking expensive pair of binoculars, a microscope to fucking figure that out, right? You don't have to be some rocket scientist to figure out how good Josh Jacobs looked last year. So depending on which team he is on, the upside of Josh Jacobs is immense if a team clearly believes he's the workhorse running back, which he is. And I would have had him ranked higher last year if I thought he was going to be the number 1 running back. So I was a bit befuddled last year. I thought Josh Jacobs was a good talent. It was just really the situation that scared me. At number 12, to close out the first round, we're going to go with Kenny Walker, running back of the Seattle Seahawks. Now, we are going to talk about some honorable mentions as well real quick. At the 12th pick, you could have easily went Derrick Henry. Could easily have went Jonathan Taylor as well, or Breece Hall. But he's coming off that injury. Again, I know the medicine is better nowadays, but I don't know if I want to place my first round pick on a guy that's coming off an injury like that. Maybe by August, I will have galaxy brained myself into thinking that. But right now, where we're sitting on January 18th, I don't feel confident in that. So Kenneth Walker was actually the worst finisher at his position on this list, running back 14.5 PPR. Running back of the Seattle Seahawks, 228 carries, 15.2 per game, number 11 at running back, 1,051 rushing yards, 70.1 per game, 11th, 35 targets, 2.3 per game, number 34, 27 receptions, 1.8 per game, number 33, 165 receiving yards, 11.1 per game, or 11.0 per game, 42nd, and 9 total touchdowns, number 14th. So it was his rookie year. He had Penny ahead of him. Then Penny gets hurt and he takes over. He's clearly going to be the workhorse running back next year. The Seahawks have a very high first round pick. This is a team that, even if they bring Geno Smith back, which I believe they will, Geno Smith, not necessarily Patrick fucking Mahomes or Josh Allen, but he's serviceable, which I didn't think going into last season. I think this is going to be a decent team yet again in Seattle, potentially a playoff team yet again. Walker is one of the key focal points in the offense. I know they have Lockett, they have Metcalf, but at the end of the day, Walker still finds his role. The only frustrating thing about Walker is this guy is very, not big play dependent, but like if you watch the games, if you don't just look at the stat sheet, right? Because if you look at the stat sheet, let's pull it up real quick. You can't really tell from the stat sheet. So right here, you can see he gets, where's his yardage at, rushing yards? So 109, 17, 26, 36. 47, 107, 133, right? You can't tell just by box score watching what the game is like. But you'll see plays where Walker runs 1 yard directly into the ass of the lineman, or he gets tackled instantly, or he pushes past that person and runs for like 50 fucking yards directly into the end zone. He is kind of big play dependent in a way. Ultimately, though, I think Kenneth Walker is going to end up being a either late first round or early second round pick. I think he has earned it based upon the talent that he has. And I think the Seahawks are going to look to be a pretty decent team yet again next year. And I think that is perfectly acceptable for him to be a first round pick. I think his receiving upside will increase as well. I don't really see him being like a 5 target per game guy, but 2.3 last year per game could easily be 3.5 next year. So thank you guys all so much for watching. Again, if you did end up enjoying, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below, as well as hitting that like button. It would help me out a ton. Let me know what you guys think about the first round. Was I missing anyone? Am I way too high on someone? If you think, Nick, you fucking idiot, I'm not drafting Cooper Kupp at the 103, you dumb bastard, then let me know down below in the comments. Love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, good boy.